Welcome to part one of this little mini-series all about roe deer, and today I'm going to be talking about the habitat where they live, some of the signs they leave behind, and also a little bit about their behaviour as well. Where I am now is just perfect habitat for roe deer, so it's kind of a mixed habitat. It is farmland, there's lots of set-aside fields, and then got some beautiful hedgerows, quite a lot of bramble, a few trees in there, a few taller trees, and then importantly there's a woodland nearby as well. I think whatever the habitat, however open and mixed it is, the roe deer do need some kind of woodland nearby, whether that's a reasonably large wood or maybe just a small copse. If you're looking for roe deer, then there's a few signs that they will leave behind. One of those, which is the most obvious sign that you can find, it's really reliable, is actually the footprints. So if it's particularly if it's been wet in the mud, sometimes you'll see just like an indentation just of the two hooves quite close together. They do use quite regular tracks throughout their wanderings. Sometimes you can clearly see where those tracks cross boundaries. Sometimes it might just simply be from one field to another, might be kind of where a few fields come together in a corner. It might be over a stream or a little beck. Quite commonly what I found as well is that the tracks will actually go through gaps in hedgerows, and sometimes they can be really low as well. Don't think they need much space to get through, because they don't. Sometimes you can find those tracks that go very low, kind of through a gap in the hedgerow. Their droppings as well, that's another sign. I'm not too familiar with their droppings, but something I'm going to show you now, which I found a few days ago, which about as conclusive as you can get for roe deer being in the area, and that is this. Which, when I saw this, I thought, I think that's a roe deer skull, and I thought, there's no way making a video about roe deer that I can come across a roe deer skull. I looked it up, had a look at a few pictures online. This definitely looks like a roe deer skull. So you can see the eyes there. The eyes are largely set on the side. If you imagine the eyes in the sockets, they're very much on the side of the head. It has the right shape, and the back of the head's really interesting. There you go, absolutely amazing. Roe deer can be incredibly regular, so you can see them in the same place at the same time. They'll often take the same routes, they'll use the same tracks and follow the same pattern. So if you get to know a group of deer, then you can really start to predict when and where they're going to be. That gives you more opportunities for photography. In my experience, I've seen they do seem to really like the field edges, and that makes sense because they've got some more cover, they probably feel a little safer. So it's quite common I'll see them at the edge of the field, close to the hedgerow, feeding there. Sometimes I have seen them out in the open, I'll see them in the middle of the field, so they're not always sticking to the edges. Another interesting thing is quite often when they go from one side of the field to the other, they do actually run. So if you do see a deer and it suddenly takes off and sprints to the other side of the field, don't assume you've spooked it. In my experience, it's quite common behaviour. You sometimes think it's you that's affecting the deer, but it actually isn't. And another little sign, I don't think it's one I've ever found, is little resting areas. So from time to time, like any species really, they'll need to take a rest. And if it's maybe in long grass, for example, or maybe it's even in a crop field, they will actually sit down there and just rest for a while. And if you can find that area where everything's been flattened, then there's a good chance that it is the resting place of a roe deer. So it can be relatively easy sometimes to kind of pin them down to a rough area, but to actually predict what they're going to do, the exact movements, is really difficult. And quite often I've seen a deer, it's gone from one field into the next, and I've assumed it's going to kind of carry on that route through that field somewhere else, and then it's backtracked back into the same field where it was. So you never quite know. The roe deer's sight is actually one of the most interesting things to me. Now, because their eyes are shaped and positioned differently to ours, it means they get a really good field of view. So they can see like the almost the complete horizon. I think it's about 300 degrees. They get a really good view of the horizon all around them. Interestingly, their eyes are designed so that they kind of see from the horizon lower down. They don't really see above the horizon too well, which makes sense because their original predators would have been from much lower down. They're less likely to get picked up by an eagle or something. In terms of visual acuity, so how well they actually see like detail, it's thought that deer their eyesight is actually worse than we are, than humans. So that means if you're wearing reasonable clothing and you stay very, very still, then there's a good chance that they may not really know that you're there. They may see something, but they won't get too spooked. Now, in contrast to that, their ability to see movement is absolutely fantastic, and I can testify to this more than anything else. Their ability to detect movement is absolutely incredible, and a number of times my approach has been completely thwarted by a roe deer that has spotted the movement. I've been quite surprised that it's picked it up. They are designed to spot movement particularly, and they do it very, very well. Also, they are slightly better at seeing in low light, so that makes it even more difficult for you to get close to them, because we're often photographing in low light at either end of the day. And it appears that they see better in the blue end of the spectrum and ultraviolet, and they don't see so well in the reds and oranges. The hearing is pretty good as well. I think it's similar to human hearing apparently, but I do think roe deer are very, very good at recognising unusual sounds and connecting that with possible danger. So when you're approaching, you really need to think about keeping sound to a minimum as well. Be really, really careful with your footing and try not to make any excess unnecessary noise. And then scent. This is really important as well. With roe deer and lots of mammals, you always want to approach downwind. If there is a wind, always be aware of the direction. So you want to make sure that the wind is in your face, coming towards you. If it's the opposite way round and coming from behind you, then it's actually going to be blowing your scent towards the deer, and they are going to pick that up and they're going to associate that again with danger. Also, I would try to avoid any really strong deodorants or aftershaves. Deer have a really heightened sense of smell compared to us, and if they smell that, then again they're likely to associate that with something unusual and potentially danger. So if you see a deer that's licking its nose constantly, then the likelihood is that it's trying to smell you, and maybe you should just stop and just take a bit more time. Part 2 will be coming very, very soon, and I'll be talking much more about the actual photography and how to get close to the deer. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.